The Witcher, the last episode of Season 3 and possibly ever. On the strength of this episode, I don't think they even deserve a Season 4, but I don't know. Maybe Netflix will keep the show going. Maybe they like losing money. Maybe it's a tax write-off. I mean, from rumours, Velma and She-Hulk are supposedly getting second seasons, so frankly, at this point, who knows? At the end of last episode, Ciri was captured and ends up as a prisoner of bounty hunters alongside a young outlaw. They're rescued by his gang, who are called the Rats, in what for me is probably the worst single fight scene in the entire 3 seasons of the show so far. And I mean, look at it. It was a farce. Some of the moves and choreography is like it's fallen out of an episode of Xena Warrior Princess. Is this supposed to be serious? Some parts of the fight are crudely sped up and it's very obvious, and I'm not sure why. Maybe that's the only way they could make the fight scenes dynamic. This is actual footage from the show. This isn't me making a joke. The Witcher costs about $150 to $200 million for each 8 episode series, and the casting is atrocious on a level that I could barely even guess which characters were supposed to be which. I had to look it up. I would play another game of which witch is supposed to be which, but none of them are witches. There is a character in the book called Reef, who is described in the book as being a fair-haired boy in a short sheepskin jacket. Now, would you like to see who the great minds behind The Witcher cast in that role? Are you sure? Here you go. Clearly the creatives behind the series read fair-haired boy as a rainbow-haired ethnic minority girl from London. Where did the money go? Why does it look so cheap? From figures in the press, The Witcher cost an estimated $200 million or so a season. Over 8 episodes a season, that's $25 million an episode. The film Aliens cost a reported $18.5 million, and that was a masterpiece. Game of Thrones Season 1 supposedly cost $6 million, and that wasn't even that long ago. Are they spending it all on catering? Is Lauren Hissrich just taking the money? She's certainly taking something. This character is supposed to be Missile, that's described in the books as a young woman with close cropped fair hair in a red doublet and high shiny boots reaching above the knee. And the writers of this show, who I can only presume long ago donated their brains to medical science, decided that it would be an awfully good idea to write Missile into a book scene where she wasn't in the book. A scene in episode 3 of the TV show where Ciri goes to explore a town and fights a creature that breaks out of a cage. This is the same girl in that episode that stole Ciri's money in the series version, and now she runs into her entirely by accident on the other side of the continent a matter of days later. On their first meeting, Ciri was supposedly here. A matter of what, 2 or 3 days ago? A week? And on their second meeting, Ciri is here, a town in Nilfgaard called Gleiswen. That's the town she's supposed to be in when the rats rescue her and their friend. So maybe Missile is a witch after all. She certainly seems able to teleport. This is not a problem that even existed in the original book. The series makers wrote in a requirement for a massive coincidence in order to make their story work. All they had to do was copy the book, and they couldn't even manage that. This would be like if I met someone in a market in Scotland, then went on holiday to Rome and just happened to bump into the same person outside the Colosseum a few days later. And they've only done that for emotional impact. This is supposed to be a cliche about women, caring more about how characters are feeling and the emotion than they do about the logic or where anything is. You aren't actually supposed to do it. And it's kind of even worse than that, because they aren't even writing how the characters should feel. They're writing how the writers would feel, and projecting that onto characters who should not think like they do. This touchy-feely stuff is not what the characters are supposed to be.
It's my fault. The Led Rockeforts made me.
Geralt is not very emotional, and neither are the Witchers. They're mostly over 100 years old. They're not prone to bouts of emotion like their teenagers. And if rumours are to be believed, they're trying to spin the rats off in another series. Probably the most embarrassing part of the entire 3 seasons of the show for me. And it was this part that they were confident would be so popular that they would need to do a spin-off. And I didn't even like the rats from the book much, but I'll get into why. The last episode was Ciri in the desert, so I'm going to go right to the Ciri part of this episode, because they've completely mutilated the book story again. They cut out whole book scenes that would have made the story make some kind of sense. You need to remember that Ciri was thrown across the entire continent by a magic portal and ended up in a desert. And as she got out of the desert, she was captured. And the reason she was captured that they don't bother to cover in the show was that there's a bounty on her head. One of the main reasons for the attack on Aretuza by Nilfgaard was that they wanted Ciri. That's why Vilgefortz was chasing her, so there are lots of people out looking for Ciri. The Emperor of Nilfgaard has the Ciri look-alike that his men captured when they took Aretuza, and he's pretending that she's the real Ciri, but he knows she isn't. And these men capture Ciri hoping to turn in the bounty. They're working as bounty hunters. They cut out whole book chapters to put in more of their own storylines for Yennefer, which ordinarily I would like, but the character they've written isn't really Yennefer. The idea of Yennefer being this emotional is kind of ridiculous. She's supposed to be a cold, hard woman. In the books, the whole story is very chaotic. Ciri is being taken through a war zone. The series cut out a duel between two Nilfgaardian nobles with a grudge against each other, one of whom was Ciri's captor. The men holding Ciri are transporting her to where they can collect the bounty, and as they're passing through a town looking for a place to spend the night, they run into another group of bounty hunters who also have a prisoner, a young man named Kayleigh, who's a member of a group called the Rats. They cut out pretty much all of the context of who the Rats even are as a group from the series. The book used exposition, which is hardly ideal. The series didn't even really bother with that. The Rats in the book are a group of outlaws from mixed backgrounds, young people and teenagers, who've also gathered a massive bounty on their heads by stealing from the rich and powerful. They're products of the war. Children who'd lost their whole families or whole towns, kids who'd been conscripted and then let down by their own armies. And the result of the series cutting all of this context out is that when the Rats turn up, anyone who hasn't read the books will have very little idea of what's going on. But the Rats all come to that tavern to rescue their friend. The drunken bounty hunters do not last long, and in the book one of them's trying to attack Ciri, so the Rats give Ciri a sword to defend herself, and because they want to watch. Now in the book and series, Ciri is far too skilled for the larger bounty hunter, but in the book she can't bring herself to take his life, so one of the Rats does it. And it's a very human thing that she hesitates. One of the Rats gets rid of him instead, and it's later when Ciri first does that to another person who's firing a crossbow at her and she's trying to save her own life. She's forced to grow out of her childhood. In the series, she just does the bounty hunter in, and this may sound like a small thing, but it demonstrates to me how badly they've ruined Ciri's character development. She's still supposed to be a young woman at this point, 13 or 14 years old. This is the point of the story. She has to start to mature and grow into a young woman. But in the series, they've already done that, and they did it far worse. And it's the same as when they made the man-sized antlion from the book last episode into a titanic crab scorpion monster. They kind of had to, because they'd already painted themselves into a corner in previous episodes by writing in Ciri dealing with giant monsters. The antlion in the series only came a few episodes after Ciri doing this, and they had to do something comparable or bigger, forgetting that Ciri was supposed to be half-starved, dehydrated and could barely walk, but when she needed to, she could still dunk like Michael Jordan. And don't get me wrong, there are changes I would have made to the book. In the book and series, Ciri gets captured and ends up escaping with the Rats. The series cut the whole escape story from the book. The whole town comes out to try and stop them in the book. And in the book she has some, how can I say it, romantic interactions of frankly very dubious consent. In the book, I'm highly dubious there was any consent. The outlaws all go to bed in the woods, and Kayleigh, the one Ciri was imprisoned with, pays her a visit in the night and wants to keep her warm. He tries to take her shirt off. In the books, she's 13 or 14 at this point, remember? In the book, the young woman with the short cropped blonde hair, Missel, shoos Kayleigh away from Ciri, and then she starts touching her. And it's strongly implied that she puts her hand down Ciri's trousers. And why do so many authors do this? This is like George R.R. Martin in Game of Thrones, where he wrote in the scenes of Daenerys and Khal Drogo early in the story, of her not having a very consensual scene when she was 13 years old, and I don't even want to get started on when Stephen King did it in It. My position hasn't changed, although it's not unusual for people to start having romantic feelings at age 13 or below. I just don't want to think about it. I don't want to know about it, and I don't want to read about it, and I definitely don't want to see it in TV shows. Teenagers are going to experiment, but they should probably do it with other teenagers. Are you listening, House of the Dragon? No, I don't want to see a character of that age get pinned to a wall and intimately touched by their own uncle. And you making it look like she was really enjoying it frankly didn't make it any better. And no, that silly scene is something I'm sincerely hoping does not make it into either The Witcher or any possible spin-off.
And then he hit.
Fuck. Jesus.
You've got spunk and balls. And I like that in a woman.